What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This one I'm going to be going over my 10 favorite tips and tricks to help you guys dominate your fantasy football leagues this season. These are all tips and tricks that I implement throughout the course of my entire season as well, and that I found to be extremely helpful in terms of helping me win my championships. It's really useful to understand what you need to do to really separate yourself from all of your league mates. Obviously, a lot of people put a lot of time into fantasy football. There are a lot of things that you can do that might not seem so major, but that are really going to help elevate you above your competition. Things are going to help you win a lot of championships this season and really make you have a lot of fun this year. So I love all these tips and tricks. If you guys have any additional tips and tricks of your own or have a favorite of any of that I suggest, feel free to let me know in the comments. I love interacting with you guys there, and we can really just sort of help each other out as a community and win as many fantasy championships as possible this season. So yeah, with that, let's get into the first tip here. Starting us off with a pretty obvious one, I think the number one overall tip and trick here is going to be that you need to prepare for your draft. This might seem really obvious, but there's just a really huge advantage to being the most prepared drafter in the room. The more and more you draft, the more and more you mock draft, and the off season, the more you're going to know how to adapt to different draft scenarios, understanding what happens if, say, a quarterback that you're not drafting very often falls to you. If a player in an auction draft goes for way cheaper than you were planning to, if the guy that you really wanted just gets sniped one pick before you, it's going to really help you just know how to pivot mid-draft and really give you the most experience and make you the most experienced drafter in your room. On top of that, it's going to help allow you to prepare a list of draft targets at every single round, guys that maybe you really do want to target in rounds, and it's really going to help you understand and prevent the situation where there won't be any instance throughout the draft where maybe the two guys you want to get picked right before you, and then you're left scrambling and just sort of forced to auto pick. Being prepared, understanding which guys you want to target in each round is really going to help you just avoid any sort of draft pick where you're actually not happy. You want to make sure that you leave your draft as happy as possible, because obviously you're drafting your team. It should be full of guys that you like, and you should have all that research and all that practice backed up to help you guys really perform at a high level on your draft nights. Number two is going to be to know your league. Knowing how your league differs from standard leagues is going to give you a huge edge over your competition. For example, there are different roster formats, either 2 wide receiver or 3 wide receiver, different number of flex spots. IR slots are important, different scoring formats, things like 4 versus 6 point per passing touchdown, half versus full PPR. Even more nuanced, you've got things like big play bonuses, big game bonuses for like 100-yard receiving games, 100-yard rushing games, and knowing where all of these little nuances are in your league are really going to help you adjust your rankings, help you adjust which guys you want to target, and really just give you an edge in your league in terms of which guys are actually going to be more valuable in your league compared to others. In addition, it really helps to know what your league mates are going to do. I personally found it to be very useful for me to go in my leagues that are long standing and go back and look at the draft history, look at what each of my league members likes to tend to do during draft day, see, okay, maybe we've got 3 or 4 league mates that are going to draft a second quarterback pretty often, so then you know that, okay, if you wait on the quarterback position, you really can't wait too long to get that last quarterback because you're going to run into the risk of backup quarterbacks starting to get drafted. Maybe you'll want to see that, okay, this guy always drafts 2 really high-end running backs, or maybe this guy's a Chargers fan. He's going to really reach on Justin Herbert this year. And that would help you know that maybe Justin Herbert's not a target for you. So just sort of preparing a list of each league member, getting as much information as you can get, and understanding how your draft's going to differ from what you'd see on a standard league is really going to help you be the most prepared for you going into your home leagues, because I think we all know that when you do get into your actual home leagues, get into those drafts, things don't exactly go the way you planned for them during all your mock drafts. There's going to be some nuance, there's going to be some surprises, and knowing your league as best as possible is going to help you be prepared for those and really sort of predict them before they happen. My third tip here is going to be another seemingly pretty obvious one. That's going to be to play to win. I think just a lot of people really do ignore this tip. Obviously, there's a point in drafts where the risk outweighs the reward on some of these guys, but I think that a lot of people get too scared with certain injury-prone players or players that are too boom or bust, and it really scares them off of players, and they really just want to take a really safe approach in their drafts, and that's great if you want to be the 4th place finisher in your league, but it's not going to help you win your league. You really want to be, at least in my opinion, it's either you win the league or you get last. I don't really care if I get 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me. My goal every year is to win championships, and the best way to do that is to take some sort of calculated risk. And I think that especially applies to players after the first 3 rounds. In the first 3 rounds, I totally understand taking a safer approach. Obviously, if any of these guys bust, it's really going to tank your season. It's going to be really hard for you even to claw your way into the playoffs. But after that, it makes a whole lot of sense to really draft guys that have league-winning upside, guys that can absolutely smash their ADPs and be guys that can be league winners. Examples of targets like this season would be guys like Mike Williams, who could legitimately post a top 10 season. We've seen him post some really spike performances before, and if this Chargers offense takes a huge leap forward, he's got a huge realm of upside. Jahmyr Gibbs going in the early 4th round right now. He's another guy that could easily be a top 5 finisher at the running back position if things break right. And Calvin would be another receiver as an example here. He's a guy that could easily be a top 10 guy, and he's not being drafted like that. There's other other examples too in the earlier rounds, like Cooper Kupp would be an example in round 1. I am still a little bit too scared to draft Cooper Kupp in the early first round, but if he gets past like pick 6, I'm perfectly happy taking Cooper Kupp there. He's the kind of guy that could easily win in your league, and obviously if he gets hurt or if things don't break out or work out for the Rams, he's going to be a guy that's going to cost you your championship this season. But I mean, the upside's there, and he could be a guy that basically carries you to a championship this season. So taking risks like that is really going to help separate you from your league members who are going to take it safe. You will have some bad seasons, you will have some good seasons, but like we'll touch on later, even if things don't break right for you guys, you're going to be able to improve your team throughout the whole course of the season. You'll be able to salvage a playoff roster. Maybe you can get lucky, but really swinging for the fences there is going to help you really just raise your ceiling on your team's potential this season. Another tip I like to use is to draft backwards. And what I mean by that is to really understand where you're trying to end up at the end of the draft, understand what your roster construction wants to look like, and then understand how the picks you're going to make later are going to influence the picks you're going to make earlier on in your draft. For example, I really love the values of David Montgomery and James Conner in rounds 6 and 7 right now, and that pretty much allows me to know that I can really target the wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end positions early on. It means that I'm generally going less running back heavy in my snake drafts and allowing me to really capitalize on the value, because if I do take some really high-end running backs early on, I'm not getting as much value out of taking those values that I love later, and it really does help influence my decisions throughout the course of the draft. So I would highly recommend that you do sort of go into the draft with a bit of a plan. Obviously, you don't want to go into anything too concrete, but you want to figure out what your complete roster wants to look like, maybe figure out which of your favorite later round guys, figure out if you want to wait on quarterback, figure out if you want to wait on tight end, things like that, and understand how it's going to allow you to influence your draft picks earlier on in the draft. My fifth tip here is going to be to trade often. If you're watching this video, you probably put a lot of time into performing well in fantasy football. You're probably a pretty well-informed fantasy football manager, and you likely know more or are more in tune with what's happening in fantasy football than your league mates, or at least at a comparable level, and that means that you're going to be able to win a lot of trades that you perform. Obviously, nobody's going to win every single trade, and that's something that I think really scares people off of making trades. They often want to just shy away from making a trade unless they know they're going to win that trade, and that really just keeps trades from happening in fantasy football leagues. But if you trade a lot, it's something I do quite a bit in all of my leagues, and you win just more than half of your trades, it's going to elevate your team over the course of the entire season. I'm making several trades throughout the course of every single season in fantasy football. I just believe that given all the time I put into researching, all the general information I feel like I have, the general sort of expectation that I'm going to win more of the trades than I lose, it allows me to feel confident that if I just sort of take the shotgun approach, make 5-6 trades over the course of the season, I'm going to win more than half of those, and by the end of all that, my fantasy team is going to be much better. Obviously, there's some risk associated with that, but like I said, we're playing to win here. You want to do everything you can to make your fantasy team as good as possible throughout the course of the season, and if you do think that you're a quality fantasy manager, do think you know what you're doing, trading often is going to be a hell of a way to really improve your roster throughout the course of the season, and it's just a lot of fun. It really keeps leagues active, and I think it's one of my favorite things I do in fantasy, actually. The sixth tip I'd like to give here is just to stay up to date with what's happening around the league. A lot of fantasy managers right now are just getting back into the swing of things for fantasy football. They're just figuring out which rookies teams drafted, which coaches switch teams, which players switch teams. And they're really playing catch up with a lot of you guys. Having stayed up to date for the whole course of the offseason, it's not too late to really get caught up to date as well. It's really going to help give you an edge in your drafts. Staying up to date with what's happening in preseason is going to help you just be as in tune with what you should be expecting come the actual regular season. An example of a guy that you really would have benefited from paying attention to last training camp would have been Dameon Pierce. There were a lot of reports about Dameon Pierce all last offseason about how he was clearly going to be the lead back in that backfield. There was a time where he was like a 9th, 10th round draft pick, and by the time we got around to like late August, he was like a 4th, 5th round draft pick. Had you stayed up to date and had your draft a little bit earlier, you could have certainly capitalized on a lot of value there. And there's going to be players like that this season. An example right now would be Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers, the rookie wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. He's absolutely showing out in camp right now, and it sounds like he's got a really good shot to be the wide receiver 1 there, and he's currently being drafted in like round 9, round 10. He's going to be a guy who'll probably be drafted in round 7 a little bit later in the offseason, and definitely a guy that I'm currently targeting as ADP. On top of just staying up to date throughout the course of the offseason, though, staying up to date during the regular season is huge as well. It's really beneficial to be up to date with which guys are hurt, which guys are going to be losing snaps. Look at snap shares week to week, look at trends across the season, and really helps give you an edge going into waiver wires and making trades as well. Helps you capitalize on grabbing guys that are going to maybe step into new roles later on in the season, and just being as informed as possible is really going to give you an edge in pretty much everything you do in fantasy this season. My 7th tip and trick here is going to be just to not be a homer. It's certainly something that I've fallen victim to several times in the past. We all have the tendency to want to draft the players that we root for naturally. This personally had me drafting a lot of Russell Wilson last season, having been a lifelong Seahawks fan, and obviously that didn't work out for me. It was clearly a mistake, and I've reached on him in several drafts, and it was something that definitely didn't help my fantasy teams. Obviously, fantasy football is supposed to be fun, so in low stakes leagues, go ahead, have fun, draft the guys that you want to draft. If you're a Chargers fan, go ahead, draft Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen, and have a party and just reach on those guys and enjoy that. But if you're in high stakes leagues, if you really want to prioritize winning, I wouldn't let your heart be the one that's drafting. I would understand that you're likely making decisions that aren't necessarily rational based off of what you're expecting throughout the course of the season. You're just drafting based off of what you hope happens. So if you are in high stakes leagues, if you do really want to benefit yourself and really just prioritizing winning, I think it's going to be really beneficial for you just to put your team allegiances aside and understand that fantasy football, if you want to win, there will be teams in your league that aren't going to put their allegiances into their draft strategy. So you doing that is going to put yourself at a disadvantage. So I would generally recommend avoiding it, except in like lower stakes home leagues. Definitely have fun with it and just enjoy the players that you like rooting for anyway. The eighth tip and trick here is going to be to draft running backs who are one injury away from being league winners. This is something that is often overlooked. I don't think it gets done well enough, really. One of the fastest ways to improve your roster during the fantasy football season is just to own a roster of fantasy running back that will take a massive step forward in terms of their role and involvement in an offense if the injury happens to the player ahead of them. The running back position is often really plug and play in the NFL. A lot of these guys are often even going to see more work if the starter gets hurt. An example of this would be Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison in the past. Dalvin Cook gets hurt, Alexander Mattison comes in. There's no backup to Mattison the Vikings have any faith in, and Mattison just gets all of the touches, and it makes him a really quality fantasy asset in those instances. So prime examples of running backs like this season that could really help you win your league should an injury happen to a guy in front of them be Antonio Gibson, Samaje Perine, A.J. Dillon, Zach Charbonnet, Tank Bigsby, Tyler Algier. All of these guys are going really late in drafts right now, and they all could easily be league winners should an injury happen to the guys ahead of them. And all these guys, even in general, what's beautiful about these guys is they've definitely got some sort of role in the offense should the starter stay healthy. They're guys that you can use if you need to, and like I said, they're an injury away from being league-winning assets. So rostering one or two of these guys is really going to give you a leg up and really just a nice lottery ticket to help elevate your roster throughout the course of the season. So my ninth tip and trick here is going to be to draft players with a lot of uncertainty surrounding them late in your drafts. One of the most frustrating things you can do in fantasy is have a useless bench player, a guy that's not performing, but a guy that you have a lot of hope and aspirations for, and it makes it so you just can't drop him early on in the season. Early on in the fantasy football season is when most of the high-quality waiver ads are made. There will be a player or two in week one that just really shines out that nobody expected, and being able to drop guys is really going to help you add those players. You don't want to miss out on those because you're still holding out on a player that has a bad week one. So I really think that your last couple of picks should be spent on a player that you're going to learn a lot about in week one. Examples of this would be running backs in timeshares, wide receiver rooms with unclear snap shares, really anywhere with a ton of uncertainty. Like, for example, the Chiefs and Giants wide receiver rooms. We really don't know exactly who the starting wide receivers for either of those teams are going to be. Draft one or two of those guys on the bottom of your bench. If Sky Moore comes out and is the starting wide receiver for the Chiefs, he's going to be a monster. If Paris Campbell is the clear slot wide receiver for the Giants, he could be a really quality asset. If Jalen Hyatt's getting starting reps for them, that would be something you really know right away. And examples like that are just guys that will either perform really well in week one or guys that will at least have a really clear role in week one, or you can just cut them and move on for someone else. Another example would be the Dolphins and Bears backfields. Right now, there's really a lot of uncertainty in Miami. Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and Devon Achane are sort of up for grabs, putting targets up for grabs, touches up for grabs. All three of those guys could have really meaningful roles week one, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens week one. So if you draft all three or one of those three after week one, after week two, you should really know what's going to be the timeshare split there and really have a good idea whether or not you want to hold on to those guys. Bears backfield as well. You've got guys like Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, and Deonta Foreman. All three of those guys have a shot to have meaningful touches this season. Seeing which one's going to pan out as the starter week one is going to be really useful for you. So if you want to draft like a Deonta Foreman, Roschon Johnson later, see what happens. And if they don't get any meaningful snaps week one, you can just cut them and move on. No harm, no foul there. So it's just going to help you understand which guys are useful early and guys that you don't want to just hold onto your bench and just keep waiting for, even though it's never going to happen. And my last tip and trick here, and this one might be the most important, that's just to not give up. Not every team's going to start 10-0. A lot of teams are going to start 1-5, 1-6, 2-7, whatever. I have won several fantasy championships in leagues where I started 2-5, or even worse, I had one league where I started 2-7, won the rest of my games, went 7-7, and ended up winning the fantasy championship. As long as you can still make the playoffs, you're always one good trade, one key injury to a player ahead of one of your guys, one breakout away from just really turning your whole season around. There's a lot of teams that are going to give up throughout the course of the fantasy season if they start slow, and being a team who's not going to do that's going to give you a huge edge. Fantasy football is a really fickle game. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of, honestly, just bad luck, good luck involved in it, and things can turn for you in an instant. Things can really get a lot better. I have like I said, there's plenty of leagues teams that'll start even 0-7 that are still going to make the playoffs this season, still have a shot at winning their fantasy championships. And as long as you just hang in there, make waiver moves, make trades, improve your roster week to week, make sure you're doing all the research you can, setting your best lineup, things are going to work out for you. You're going to be a much better roster. You will not be a bottom barrel roster if you just keep performing well. I had one league last season where I was a homer. Like I said, I drafted Russell Wilson, drafted Jonathan Taylor early on. Things went horribly. Started out like 0-5. I scrapped and clawed. Ended up 6-8. Didn't make the playoffs in it. But the point being is, I literally had one of the worst drafts I could have possibly had. I still was able to scrap and claw my way to almost being a playoff team in that league. Obviously, I don't recommend doing that, or I don't recommend having a really horrible draft and putting yourself in that situation. But if you're in a situation like that, you can always improve your team. Like I said, you're always one trade, one waiver pickup, one quality breakout away from really turning your season around. And just giving up is just going to be really detrimental to you. You're going to be sad. You're going to be waiting for next year. And on top of that, it just makes fantasy football a lot more fun when every team in the league is continuing to try. It's not fun when you get towards the end of a season. You've got 2 or 3 teams that are just sort of going through the motions. Maybe they're not even setting their lineups. It just makes the whole league less fun. And I think that it's really important to just be a good league member as well, and just make sure you keep putting your best foot forward and really try and win as long as you can. So that'll do it for my top 10 tips and tricks to take into this fantasy football season. I really hope you like them. I hope you can find them useful for yourselves during the course of this fantasy football season. If you have any other tips and tricks or advice you'd like to give, feel free to let us know in the comments. I'd love to see that as well. If you want more content like this, more things that I can do to help you win your league, really help you just dominate this season, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'd love it if you would. We're really trying to grow the channel as fast as possible here. We're at like 635 subscribers at the time of this recording. I'd love to hit 1,000 by the start of the NFL season. It's obviously going to be really hard to do that, but I think we can. The channel's been growing really quickly lately, and it's just been a lot of fun watching the channel grow there. On top of that, if you want to help the channel out and you've already subscribed, please do like this video, give it a thumbs up. It's really going to help with the algorithm, really help me know that I'm doing a good job. Up next, we're doing just some Dynasty startup advice. We had a member a subscriber request that, so happy to do that video real quick. I'll try and get some mock drafts in here, some must draft players as well, must avoid players. Might have to start doing some days with 2 videos a day to get you all the content that I'm trying to get you guys before your draft seasons are over. So it's gonna be a lot of content coming up soon. Stay tuned. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm really gonna be here as much as I can to help you guys win your leagues this season. So yeah, with that, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.